Yeah, it's quite a sad one really, because we've built a culture around it as well. I've noticed. You see, whenever I don't know if you've noticed this, Dr. Josef, but
Mhm.
if I go onto Instagram, which I don't do very often, I've noticed now that there's lots of, there's an online culture around mental illness and mental things like depression and ADHD. This all sort of pops up on my timeline, and it's quite interesting to see, because it's all dressed up in quite a fancy way. The pictures look really sort of, I don't know, engaging almost, and the language is quite interesting as well. And it will say something like 5 symptoms of ADHD or something, or how to know if you're ADHD. And I scroll through it just to have a look. And I'm like, you've just described me. So does that mean then that I'm ADHD? And obviously I know I'm not. But the symptoms are so generalized, and it's almost, you're describing pretty much everybody. Everybody at some point is going to feel that symptom. And I think, I'll give you an example. One of the symptoms was an ADHD person doesn't like doing what they don't like to do. And I thought, well, that's everybody. That's everybody, right? So, and there was a few more which were very similar. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that was the one that's really stood out to me. I'm thinking, how many other thousands of people have read that post and are now thinking, oh, wait a second, I'm now ADHD, or I could be ADHD. Maybe it's a 14-year-old girl or lad or something, and then they go to school and they start getting a little bit of trouble, and it's like, oh, wait a second, I read that symptom, I've got that symptom, and the teachers, called it out. And before you know it, now they're talking to their mother, maybe they've got in trouble in school again, and now their parents bit, and this all leads on to maybe at some point they get diagnosed. Have you noticed that at all? This sort of online culture?
Yeah, the online culture, there's a lot of things there that are troubling. I mean, there's the self-diagnosis, and I think in general, what people hear in society these days about mental illness is people with mental illness, they're bullied, they're stigmatized, they're victims, and it's under-recognized, and we all ought to be really kind to these folks, and they have these, they have brain problems, and it's kind of like a message like that. And I'm going off script here, but I also feel like you can. I think sometimes there's almost benefits in a sense to self-identifying as being mentally ill. Sometimes, there could be really legitimate, scary things happening in your life. There's some abuse going on at home. You're not safe. You're getting beat up, and then there's maybe you're not doing well at school, and you're just like, man, I'm a kid. I don't really understand how all of these things are influencing me. All I know is that I'm not doing as well as my peers, and I feel really shit about myself. And, what you would like is a professional to kind of sit down with that person and just say, hey, let's really unpack this. But I think sometimes they walk into the doctor's office and they say, well, I must be depressed. And the doctor goes, well, that's, meet 5 out of 9 symptoms. It's a lot easier for me to just kind of write you a script and do that than really get to know you. And so they go, okay, well, that's the thing. That's why I feel so miserable. It's not because, I've got a history of trauma. I have a hard time relating to people now because of a very negative perception of the world and other people's motives. They're not getting some kind of more empowering understanding of what's happening. And so, yeah, maybe it's because maybe it's because I have a mental illness. It's the same with ADHD. Not everyone needs to go and be a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. Like, if you don't like some of these, you don't like writing essays, you don't like, high-level mathematics. Truth is, you may be way better as a salesperson. You may be way better with your hands. And so there's all these messed up things, ideas that people have about what it means to be successful. And so,
Mm.
I mean, follow that line, oh, I don't like these things. Now I have a brain problem. I'm going to get on stimulants so I can study subjects I'm naturally not interested in, so I can get a job I'm not actually passionate about, and so I can be unhappy, rather than someone saying, well, what naturally makes you tick? And I feel like schooling systems, all of these things, sometimes at their worst, they can feel like a production line where it's just like, let's just kind of churn people through. There's not this individual level of attention. And I mean, I know we're jumping all over the place, and I hate to bring it here, but I will, because it is something I'm worried about. I also worry about the transgender stuff as well, as that being a trendy topic, and how you can have people who are confused about their sexuality, maybe they're unhappy. And when you've got social media just saying, there's this victimized group out there and it's under-recognized, and really celebrating it, I also think it can lead to people saying, well, maybe that's what's going on, and then all of a sudden they end up on treatment for something that may not actually be the true root cause of what's going on. I mean, hey, if it is for some people, that's okay. But I do certainly worry that sometimes we just cheerlead people onto hormone blockers and things like that, because we want to be championing a social cause rather than really actually caring about the person that's there. I think people get that confused. It's a really interesting interface between medicine, social topics, politics, and how I think it makes how it influences young people.
Yeah, well, young people are susceptible to ideas, right? Especially when you're, well, from a toddler, their formative years, their mind is a sponge, it's wide open, they're not fully conscious yet. And what goes into the unconscious mind, it plays out later on in life. And we're seeing that now. It's funny you mentioned, the transgender stuff, because that stuff now, it's not very active over here in the UK. We won't go into too much detail on this because it's way off topic, we know. But in America, in the States, you guys are about 15 years ahead of us in terms of that. You've been teaching this to kids for for 15 years, and now we're seeing these kids now as young adults. They're 19, 20 years old, and we're seeing this behavior play out because it's been planted in their unconscious from the age of, since kindergarten, right? They're going around playing with all sorts of ideas back then. So we're seeing that development, and we're seeing it play out. And this is what we've got now. These ideas are destructive, and they're confusing so many people. So many people now are confused about who they are and their identity. And I always go back to the question, why is this happening? I don't suppose you have an answer at all to that question. Have you ever thought about it?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm with all of, with the mental health thing, it's always, the message, the influence always comes from somewhere. If we're talking about the ideas that mental health problems are mostly biological, which isn't, they're minimally biological, and they're mostly, other problems like that one, you can clearly link back to commerce. You can link that one back to drug companies. You can also, in some sense, link it back to the fact that it's a lot easier for psychiatric and medical professionals to function within a biological model because it takes less time than getting to know people. There's real commercial reasons for that kind of messaging to flourish. I think the transgender stuff also comes maybe somewhat from a political sense as well, where you've got certain political groups who, have a reputation for championing the vulnerable and things like that, and that's kind of fanned up. And so yeah, I think sometimes it's who's got the loudest microphone? Is it a political party that wants to talk about something? Is it a drug company that can pay billions of dollars for a message? Ultimately, I'm going to show my cards here and kind of share with people kind of who I am, and maybe it seems naive. I wish the messaging out there was just like, find something that you're passionate about. Doesn't matter what it is. That's important for you. find an intimate partner you can share your life with, you know, someone that's a real teammate of yours, have friends, be physically active. You know, I mean, I think if that was the messaging, the main ones, I think people would be on a much better track. You know, when things are, you know, going off base, they're like, probably need one of those 4 core things to feel good again. How can I work towards those things? And instead, I think they get sidetracked into thinking they're the wrong gender sometimes, or that they have some kind of brain problem. And it's just, I mean, I would like messaging, but there's nothing to sell with that messaging. That's why we don't hear it, even though I think that is really what people need to hear. That's not selling anything, or advancing anyone's agenda. So that, I mean, that's my sense of it.
Well, you know, it's I'm glad to hear that. I'm what you've said is absolutely true. You know, and it's not said enough, and it just makes me wonder why that message why is the transgender message in a school and not that message? How is that leaked in? How has that crept in? You know, that's what's interesting to me. It makes me think, well, you know, obviously
sorry I brought up the transgender thing, because I know it's so off topic, and now we're kind of talking about it, but it's good to juxtapose those things, because I mean,
yeah,
it seems like such a fringe issue, and the other stuff I think is pretty well,
it's all linked.
Yeah.
It's all linked. It's all causing mental illness. It's all causing mental health problems, because so many kids now that are just so confused about who they are and their identity. Oh my God, I've got a penis, but I feel like a girl. Like, what the hell's going on? I'm 5 years old. You know, obviously that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it's worrying. It's really worrying.